Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm DJIBOUTI and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says linking terrorism with Islam is the biggest injustice being done to Muslims. He was speaking at the 14th Summit of the Economic Cooperation Organization via video link. Referring to India, Khan said COVID lockdowns are being used to suppress Muslims in occupied territories. He expressed hope that inter-Afghan talks will lead to durable peace in Afghanistan. The UN has raised alarm at human rights violations in Ethiopia's Tigray region that could amount to war crimes. In a statement, UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet said Ethiopian and Eritrean troops are possible perpetrators of sexual violence and killings. She called for an independent probe into the situation in Tigray, which has been rocked by months of fighting. Myanmar police have broken up anti-coup demonstrations in several cities with tear gas and gunfire. It comes after 38 people were killed in the most violent day of the unrest since last month's military coup. The protesters were demanding the release of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi and restoration of democracy. In Yemen, a car bomb has killed a number of fighters traveling in a convoy of vehicles belonging to southern separatist forces in the city of Aden. In a tweet, the Southern Transitional Council confirmed the attack on its forces but gave no figures. A military helicopter has crashed in southeast Turkey, killing 9 people and injuring 4. In a statement, the Defense Ministry described the crash as accidental. The number of global COVID-19 infections has surpassed 115 million, with more than 2.55 million deaths. Brazil has reported over 1,900 coronavirus fatalities as the country's death toll is nearing 160,000. In Pakistan, more than 1,500 people tested positive for the virus and 64 died overnight, with the death toll reaching 13,076. And in cricket, the Pakistan Cricket Board has postponed the 6th edition of Pakistan Super League due to rising COVID-19 cases in players and officials. The PCB said the decision was made after a meeting with the team owners considering the health and the well-being of all participants. A total of 14 matches had been played in the tournament that was held at the National Stadium in Karachi. The headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says linking terrorism with Islam is the biggest injustice which is being done to Muslims. He was speaking at the 14th Summit of the Economic Cooperation Organization via video link. Referring to India, Khan said COVID lockdowns are being used to suppress Muslims in occupied territories. Khan said the pandemic has severely affected the economy of ECO states. He proposed a 6-point plan to provide developing countries the fiscal space to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. The Prime Minister also expressed hope that intra-Afghan talks will lead to durable peace in Afghanistan. The U.S. says its Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has held productive talks with the stakeholders of the Afghan peace process. State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the violence levels in Afghanistan are unacceptably high. Price's statement comes after Khalilzad wrapped up his 3-day visit in Kabul. Khalilzad held meetings with the Afghan leaders, activists, and other influential political figures. The U.S. envoy is set to depart for Doha, where he will discuss Afghan peace with the Taliban. A doctor has been killed in an IED explosion in Afghanistan's Nangarhar province. Dr. Sadaf was working for the maternity ward of a public hospital. The provincial governor's office said the blast targeted a rickshaw the woman was traveling on in Jalalabad. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. This comes 2 days after 3 female TV journalists were killed by unknown men in the same city. The attack was later claimed by the ISIS militant group. Pakistan has reiterated the call for resolving the Kashmir issue as per the UN Security Council's resolutions. At a briefing, a Foreign Office spokesperson said there is no change in Pakistan's policy on Kashmir. He said the resolution of the issue is imperative for regional peace and stability. He added that Iran has accepted Pakistan's proposal of setting up joint border markets to promote economic activity. Replying to a question, he said the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor will benefit the whole region. British lawmakers are set to debate the threat to press freedom and the safety of the protesters in India next week. The House of Commons Petitions Committee confirmed this after an online petition crossed 100,000 signatures. In Delhi, a court has granted bail to 5 persons, including a high school student, in a case related to the Republic Day violence. The court said the accused cannot be kept in custody merely on the apprehension that they might again commit a similar offense. Since November 26, farmers have been protesting on Delhi borders against the 3 controversial farm laws. More than 200 farmers have died in the ongoing agitation, including 5 those who committed suicide. A global non-profit organization that works on digital rights says India is leading the world in internet shutdowns. In a report, Access Now said nearly 70% of the global net outages in 2020 happened in India. The group says out of 155 instances of internet shutdown in India, 109 took place at the behest of the Modi government. The watchdog cited the blackout in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir as an example. Access Now elaborated that India has been topping the global list for the last 3 years now. It urged the Modi government to ensure more transparency on how these shutdowns are enforced. The Western powers have scrapped a U.S. plan for the UN nuclear watchdog to pass an anti-Iran resolution for lack of cooperation. Diplomats say IAEA chief Rafael Grossi has told its board of governors that the agency plans to hold technical talks with Iran. He said the first meeting would be in Iran in early April. Meanwhile, Washington says Tehran has been given another chance to address the IAEA's concerns on uranium particles. In Yemen, a car bomb has killed a number of fighters traveling in a convoy belonging to southern separatist forces in the city of Aden. In a tweet, the Southern Transitional Council confirmed the attack on its forces but gave no figures. It said 2 military commanders survived the assassination attempt. Aden is the seat of Yemen's government, which is in December formed a new power-sharing cabinet under a deal brokered by Saudi Arabia. Myanmar police have broken up anti-coup demonstrations in several cities with tear gas and gunfire. It comes after 38 people were killed on the most violent day of the unrest since last month's military coup.
5 fighter jets made several low passes in a formation over the city of Mandalay. Aung San Suu Kyi's party says flags will fly at half-mast at its offices to commemorate the deaths. The protesters have been demanding the release of ousted leader Suu Kyi and restoration of democracy. UN Special Envoy on Myanmar, Christine Schreiner Bergener, said the death toll from the protests has risen to over 50. Bergener also warned that Myanmar's army may be going back to square one on the treatment of the Rohingya Muslims. She said the junta is following through on its intention to re-evaluate the work of the 2 commissions on the Rohingya. Diplomats said the UN Security Council is due to discuss Myanmar's situation on Friday in a closed meeting.
In Nepal, the government has signed a peace deal with the Communist Party of Nepal after it agreed to renounce violence. According to a joint statement, the three-point agreement was signed at a ceremony in the capital Kathmandu. In a statement, the government agreed to lift a ban and release the party members, dropping all legal cases against them. In 2019, Prime Minister Sharma Oli's government declared the CPN a criminal outfit over its alleged involvement in bombings and killing of civilians. The Communist Party split from the United Maoists, who fought the government troops between 1996 and 2006, leaving more than 17,000 people dead. In Hong Kong, 32 of the 47 pro-democracy activists charged with subversion have been denied bail after a 4-day court hearing. All the activists will remain in custody while the government appeals against the bail ruling for the 15. They were accused of organizing an unofficial primary election ahead of last year's legislative polls. This is the largest use yet of the new security law, which came into force after mass anti-government protests last year. Beijing says the law was needed to bring stability. Russia has dismissed U.S. calls to destroy its chemical weapons as baseless and illogical. The Kremlin said Moscow destroyed the weapons long ago in line with the Chemical Weapons Convention. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Washington should fulfill its obligations under the convention. Peskov added the statement appeared to be another U.S. attempt to hold Russia back. Earlier, Moscow clashed with the European countries at the UN Security Council over a report from the Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog. The report blamed the Syrian Air Force for a series of attacks using sarin and chlorine on a rebel-held town in 2017. The UN has raised alarm at the human rights violations in Ethiopia's Tigray region that could amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. In a statement, UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet said Ethiopian and Eritrean troops are possible perpetrators of sexual violence and killings. She called for an independent probe into the atrocities. Tigray has been gripped by fighting since early November, when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed launched military operations against Tigray rebels. The fighting has killed thousands of people and displaced hundreds of thousands from their homes. At least 20 migrants have drowned off Djibouti after human smugglers pushed 80 people off the boat. In a tweet, the International Organization for Migration said the boat was on its way to Yemen. A regional director for Africa, Mohammed Abdikar, said this is the third such tragedy in less than 6 months. He said more than 70 lives have been lost in such incidents. Meanwhile, an IOM spokesperson said smugglers had judged that the boat was overloaded. Yvonne Negay said dozens of others thrown off the boat were also feared to have died. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The number of global coronavirus infections has crossed 115 million, with more than 2.55 million deaths. Brazil has reported over 1,900 daily fatalities as the country's death toll approaches 160,000. More in this report.
As the data on new coronavirus variants comes out, the results indicate highly distressing trends. Scientists believe that Brazil's rampant COVID-19 outbreak has become a global threat. A record spike in deaths for the second straight day forces Brazil's Sao Paulo state to impose more restrictions. The World Health Organization has also warned of a worrisome rise in cases after weeks of declining infections. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden says the decision to end the mask mandate in Texas and Mississippi states is a big mistake.
The last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime everything's fine, take off your mask, forget it. It still matters. I carry a card with me, I don't have it, I put it on my desk. As of yesterday, we had lost 511,874 Americans.
Elsewhere, a landmark report reveals that countries with high obesity levels, such as the UK and the US, have the highest death rates from COVID-19. Greece has extended the lockdown to more areas until March 15 after a surge in new infections. Meanwhile, Germany has adopted a new plan for gradual relaxation of the country's long-running lockdown.
Und jetzt liegt die Aufgabe der Politik.
Politicians' task now is, and this is what we discussed during so many hours, to take the next steps wisely. They should be opening steps without setting ourselves back during this pandemic. There are many examples in Europe of a dramatic third wave, and this danger, and we shouldn't delude ourselves, also exists for us. We must always keep this in mind. Yet I can say that spring of 2021 will be different from the spring 1 year ago.
More published evidence shows the UK variant is likely to drive a large surge without faster vaccine drives and more shutdowns, and international police say security officials in China and South Africa have seized thousands of counterfeit vaccine doses.
COVID-19 has claimed 64 more lives in Pakistan over the last 24 hours, taking the toll to 13,076. The Health Ministry reported 1,519 new infections overnight. So the caseload has reached over 585,000. The ministry said more than 555,000 people have recovered so far. It added the number of active cases has reduced to just over 17,000. A little under 2,000 patients are currently being treated in hospitals for COVID-19. Pakistan has announced to issue new smart cards to Afghan refugees in the country. In a statement, Pakistan's special representative to Afghanistan, Mohammad Sadiq, said the initiative will foster relationships. The process of issuing new smart cards will continue for 6 months. Sadiq said the National Data Authority will verify and update refugees' data during the time. He added the smart cards will authenticate the presence of refugees in Pakistan and enhance their protection. Pakistan is home to an estimated 3 million refugees, most of them Afghans fleeing war. Germany's ambassador to Pakistan, Bernhard Stefan Schlagheck, hails Islamabad's efforts for peace in the region. He called on Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in General Headquarters Rawalpindi. The two exchanged views on regional security and the Afghan peace process. They also discussed matters of mutual interest. The Army Chief lauded the 5th round of Pakistan-Germany strategic dialogue. He said Pakistan attaches great importance to its ties with Berlin. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has met with the European ambassadors in Islamabad. The meeting has been organized as part of the government's efforts to promote economic diplomacy. Qureshi said the purpose of the meeting was to review economic engagement with the EU countries. The Foreign Minister said impediments to economic growth were identified during the meeting. He said Pakistan's trade with the EU had doubled over the last 8 years due to the GSP Plus status. The envoys lauded Qureshi's efforts to promote mutually beneficial economic partnerships. Pakistan Navy ship Nasr has arrived at West Africa's Cotonou port carrying humanitarian aid for Niger and Benin. The military's media wing said the ship was warmly received by officials of both the countries upon arrival. It said the mission commander met with the civilian and the military leadership of Niger and Benin. The officials discussed matters of mutual interest and bilateral relations in the meeting. The hosts from both the countries thanked Pakistan and the Navy for the humanitarian aid. A military helicopter has crashed in southeast Turkey, killing 9 people and injuring 4. In a statement, the Defense Ministry described the crash as accidental. It added that the injured were rushed to the hospital. In Afghanistan, at least 14 people have been killed and 4 injured after an avalanche hit a village in northeastern Badakhshan province. Officials said the incident occurred in Hawze Shah locality of Ragistan district. A rescue team and local police have been dispatched to the area to assist the affected people. The officials said the number of casualties may rise. The U.S. has hailed Germany's plan to sail a warship across the South China Sea. A State Department spokesperson called its support for a rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific. She said the international community has a vital stake in the preservation of an open maritime order. Earlier, China said countries enjoyed the freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea under international law. However, it added this must not be taken as an excuse to undermine Beijing's sovereignty and security. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reiterated the need to engage Beijing from a position of strength.
Our relationship with China will be competitive when it should be, collaborative when it can be, and adversarial when it must be. The common denominator is the need to engage China from a position of strength. That requires working with allies and partners, not denigrating them, because our combined weight is much harder for China to ignore.
President Joe Biden says the U.S. will make its judgments on the rocket attack in Iraq after identifying who was responsible. On Wednesday, a U.S. contractor died after 10 rockets hit an airbase housing the coalition troops in Anbar province. Talking to reporters in the Oval Office, Biden said Washington is following the incident through right now. He said only a contractor died in the attack, but he passed on due to a cardiac arrest. The Pentagon said the U.S. has shown it won't shy away from responding to attacks against its personnel when necessary. In a press briefing, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said Iraq will investigate the attack and the U.S. will see what they learned. He said if a response is warranted, the U.S. will act. The U.S. House of Representatives has approved legislation aimed at preventing police misconduct. The bill is named after African-American George Floyd, whose killing by a policeman sparked the Black Lives Matter movement. The Democrats pushed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act through the House by 220 to 212 votes. The House voted largely along party lines, with only one Republican voting in favor of the bill. The bill bans controversial police tactics and eases the way for lawsuits against officers violating constitutional rights. Democratic Representative Karen Bass drafted the legislation with House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler.
I know that change is difficult, but I believe fundamentally that police officers don't want to work in an environment where the culture says if they are to step up, if they are to say anything, if an officer is abusive or as an officer is corrupt, then their very lives could be in danger. So one of the goals of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act is to raise the standards of policing in America and also to transform the culture.
New Zealand police say they have arrested 2 people following a threat against the mosques in Christchurch. Police said an online threat was made against the Al-Noor Mosque and the Linwood Islamic Center. Canterbury District Commander Superintendent John Price said a 27-year-old man has been charged with threatening to kill. In a briefing, Price said the post was tipped off to police through their Crime Stoppers line. The official said the man is due to appear in Christchurch District Court on 5th of March. New Zealand heightened alert ahead of the 2nd anniversary of Christchurch attack on 15th of March. China's National Space Administration has released 3 high-resolution images of Mars captured by the Tianwen-1 probe. The images were taken at a distance of up to 350 kilometers above the surface of Mars with a resolution of about 0.7 meters. The Space Administration said these visuals include 3 panchromatic images and 1 colored image. The Tianwen-1 spacecraft is currently in a parking orbit of Mars, about 223 million kilometers from the Earth. The scientific exploration equipment on the spacecraft has been turned on. It will conduct a detailed survey of the topography, landform, sand and dust weather in the potential landing zone. A prototype of the SPACEX Starship rocket SN10 has exploded after successfully launching and landing vertically. The high-altitude experimental test was conducted in the U.S. state of Texas. Touching down in a vertical position, the SN10 made it further than the previously tested models. The SN9 and SN8 had blown up on their final descent. The video feed provided by SPACEX cut the signal after the touchdown, but various fan feeds on social media showed the rocket exploding at the base of the craft. The Starship SN10 was a test model heavy lift rocket developed by a renowned entrepreneur, Elon Musk's private space company. It intended to carry up to 100 tons of cargo and humans on future missions to the Moon and Mars. The cause of the rocket's explosion is still unclear. Paragliders Horacio Lorenz and Rafael Guberna expertly glided around the world's largest fountain at the Point Palm Jumeirah in Dubai. Spaniard Lorenz, a 5-time world champion and Brazilian governor, took to the skies defying gravity and performing in unison. The Palm Fountain features 2 floating platforms which cover 14,000 square meters of seawater. It reaches 105 meters high with a display involving 3,000 LED lights that are in sync with hit songs from sunset until midnight. Walt Disney's latest animated movie, Raya and the Lost Dragon, aims to offer a fresh take on a princess tale in a fantasy world. The critics have appreciated the film's animation, storytelling, and message. More in this report.
The filmmakers at Walt Disney Animation Studios were faced with a novel challenge. Over 6 years, around 6 different films and storylines were created and screened to test audiences around the characters, but none felt quite right. The final version incorporates characters and themes from all the previous projects. The baddies of the piece are the purple fog creatures who arbitrarily turn people to stone.
You and the dragon are coming with me.
My sword here says we're not.
The plot resonates strongly in today's world, draws its cultural roots from Southeast Asia. The movie features prominent Asian actors in Hollywood, from Kelly Marie Tran, Awkwafina to Gamma Chan, Daniel Day Kim, and Sandra Oh. Awkwafina says she is happy about Hollywood being inclusive. Tran says the vision for the movie is different from what is historically thought of and seen of a Disney princess. Co-director Don Hall says they had been careful during COVID-19 to not sound opportunistic, as the movie features a killer plague virus. The movie is being released on the 5th of March on Disney+.
10 years after the Fukushima disaster in Japan, a pet whisperer who lives in the restricted zone vows to stay with his feline friends to the end. What in this report?
Sakai Kato has found his life's purpose in taking care of abandoned pets in an empty township of Fukushima's restricted zone, while all of his neighbors and family fled after the quake and subsequent nuclear plant meltdown a decade ago. Kato vowed to stay on and began taking care of the former residents' stray pets. Kato and his 41 stray cats live in a 2-story house that has fallen into utter despair.
Police and firefighters have come and asked me why I am still here, and I told them that I have to be here because I need to take care of these abandoned cats. They said life is important and everyone was evacuated. But at that time I thought I would die, and if I had to die, I decided that I would like to die with these kids.
His project eats up around $7,000 a month for food, fuel, and veterinary expenses. Kato estimates he has spent at least $750,000 over the past 10 years.
It's getting harder to take care of the animals, so I think it will be even much harder in 10 years. So I want to be around when the last cat dies. Then I want to die after that, no matter if it takes a day or an hour.
But Kato's kindness has not always received a warm welcome from onlookers. On 25th of February, Kato was arrested on suspicion of freeing wild boar caught in trap set up by Japan's government in November.
The brother of American singer MARIAH Carey has sued her for defamation and inflicting emotional distress. The accusations are based on the content of a recent best-selling memoir, The Meaning of MARIAH Carey. Morgan Carey has sought unspecified damages in a complaint filed in a New York state court. The lawsuit comes 1 month after MARIAH's older sister Allison sued her for $1.25 million over the same memoir. The book was published in September and topped the New York Times non-fiction bestseller list in October. It describes the dysfunctional, poverty-stricken childhood and early career struggles of the 51-year-old music artist. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Another business updates. The U.S. has called on Saudi Arabia to renounce its special developing nation status at the World Trade Organization. Washington noted the World Bank designated the G20 member as a high-income country. In a statement to the WTO, Washington said Riyadh is a wealthy and influential player in the global economy. It said the step will allow Saudi Arabia to significantly contribute to ensuring the WTO remains asked the Geneva-based trade watchdog to improve the protection of intellectual property. European Union competition enforcers have cleared a $24 billion French scheme to help pandemic-hit companies via loans. European Commission said the scheme gives a state guarantee to commercial banks on private lending to improve their capital position. The French state guarantee will cover up to 30% of the loans and subordinated bonds to be acquired by private investment vehicles. It said these loans and subordinated bonds must be issued before June 30, 2022, with a maturity of 8 years. The U.S. stocks have opened lower, maintaining the previous losing streak of 2 days. Investors digested a better-than-expected reading on weekly jobless claims. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index traded fractionally lower, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite fell over 1.5%. The S&P 500 index dropped nearly 1%. Meanwhile, oil prices have risen as major producers hold a critical meeting to review supply cuts. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Talk.